Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is a horrifying truth behind one of America's most brutal crimes, a 48-hour nightmare of torture, rape, and murder that shattered everything we thought we knew about human evil. Tonight's case will shake you to your core. We do have a warning. What you're about to watch is a true story, and the following program contains details that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. It is one of the most shocking and horrifying murder cases to ever happen in East Tennessee, one that took 2 young lives full of promise and put their families through 8 criminal trials. The tragic murder shocked the community and the families of these 2 young victims. Knoxville, Tennessee, January 7th, 2007. It's a cold, quiet Sunday morning. A railroad worker is making his rounds on the tracks behind Chipman Street when he sees it. A body wrapped in a comforter like a grotesque gift, burned beyond recognition, hands bound behind the back with shoelaces. This was Christopher Newsom, 23 years old. He'd been shot 3 times, in the neck, back, and head, raped, and set on fire while still alive. In his final moments, Chris had been marched barefoot to the railroad track, a sock stuffed in his mouth, his wrists and ankles tied, his head covered with a sweatshirt secured with shoelaces. The investigation revealed he was raped an hour or 2 before his death. But Chris isn't the only victim. 3 miles away, inside a rental house on Chipman Street, something even worse is happening. Channon Christian is dying slowly, deliberately. She's been tortured for hours, bleach poured down her throat, her body beaten and broken. Now she's been stuffed into a kitchen garbage can, wrapped in trash bags, suffocating inch by inch in absolute darkness. She's 21, a college senior with everything to live for. 12 hours earlier, she and Chris were just another young couple in love. They had plans: dinner, movies, a friend's party, normal Saturday night stuff. Instead, they were carjacked by 5 predators who saw them as nothing more than playthings. What followed was so savage that it would take 12 years and 8 trials to bring their killers to justice. Welcome to the Shadow Files crime series. Before we dive into the horrors of what happened, you need to know who Channon and Chris really were, because they weren't just victims. They were real people with dreams, ambitions, and futures that were stolen from them. Channon Gail Christian was born on April 29, 1985, in Nacogdoches, Texas. When she was 12, her family moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, where Channon would bloom into the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. At Farragut High School, she was magnetic. Teachers remember her infectious smile lighting up classrooms. Friends described someone who could walk into any room and instantly make it brighter. But Channon wasn't just a pretty face with a winning personality. She was brilliant, driven. By January 2007, she was weeks away from graduating from the University of Tennessee with a degree in sociology. Channon had plans to work with underserved communities, wanted to make a difference in the world. Her parents, Gary and Dina Christian, watched their daughter with pride and amazement. She was their miracle. On Saturday, January 6, 2007, Gary and Dina expected their daughter home by Sunday morning. Channon always kept her word, always called. Sunday morning came. The phone stayed silent. By Sunday afternoon, panic was setting in. This wasn't like Channon. They had no idea that their daughter was already dead. Christopher Newsom was Knoxville through and through. Born on September 21st, 1983, he was a kind of young man who embodied everything good about small-town America. At Halls High School, Chris was a baseball star because he had heart, playing every game like it mattered, lifting others up. After high school, Chris stayed home, enrolled at Pellissippi State Community College, learned a trade, and became a carpenter. If you drive through Knox County today, you'll still see Chris Newsom's handiwork. Each piece a testament to a young man who took pride in building things that would last. At 23, Chris was building a life with Channon Christian. Friends say they were perfect together. She was a fire. He was a steady flame. Chris was the kind of guy who texted back right away, who showed up when he said he would. On Saturday night, January 6th, his friends expected to see him at a party. They sent texts, left voicemails, called again and again. The messages went unanswered. By Sunday morning, Chris Newsom's phone had gone silent forever. Saturday, January 6, 2007, started like any other weekend. Channon spent the afternoon getting ready at her friend's apartment in North Knoxville, in a great mood, excited about the evening ahead. Around 8 p.m., Chris pulled up in his truck to pick her up. Security cameras would later capture what happened next. Channon walked out to meet him. They embraced, a simple, sweet moment between two people who loved each other. But this time, someone was watching. From somewhere in the shadows of that parking lot, 5 predators had spotted their prey. They had been driving around, looking for victims, looking for someone to hurt, someone to destroy. Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom had just become perfect targets. What happened next took less than 5 minutes. At gunpoint, both were forced into the back of Shannon's Toyota 4Runner. Their hands were tied behind their backs. Their normal Saturday night had just become a nightmare. The 4Runner pulled away from the apartment complex at approximately 9 p.m. Inside were 7 people. Channon and Chris as terrified captives and 5 killers already planning unspeakable horrors. Meanwhile, across town, friends were gathering for party. Where were Channon and Chris? This wasn't like them. By 11 p.m., some drove back to the apartment complex where the couple had been last seen. They found Chris's truck still parked, but Shannon's 4Runner was gone, and so were Channon and Chris. 3 miles away, at a rental house on Chipman Street, the real horror was just beginning. The house belonged to Lemaricus Davidson, 25, a career predator recently released from prison for carjacking. Davidson wasn't alone. His half-brother, Letalvis Cobbins, 24, George Thomas, 24, known as Detroit, and Eric Boyd, 34, the oldest, all career criminals, were gathered there like a pack of rabid animals. The group had a 5th member, Vanessa Coleman, 18, Cobbins' girlfriend, who would prove that evil doesn't discriminate by gender. On Saturday, these 5 predators made a decision that would seal the fate of 2 innocent people. They were going hunting.
The opportunity came at the Washington Peak apartment complex. Davidson, Cobbins, and Boyd spotted Channon's vehicle. Then they saw the couple. The decision was made in seconds. Guns were drawn. Get in the car. Simple words that changed everything. The 3-mile drive to Chipman Street must have felt like an eternity. Boyd controlled the victims in the back seat, making sure they understood any attempt to escape meant immediate death. At 2316 Chipman Street, Thomas and Coleman were waiting. The house was ready. Then came the most chilling moment of all at 12:33 de la noche on January 7. Somehow, impossibly, Channon managed to call her parents. I'll be back between 2 and 3 de la madrugada, so he told them, her voice steady, giving no hint of the terror. It was a lie forced upon her. A cruel deception to buy her captor's time. It would be the last time Gary and Dana Christian ever heard their daughter's voice. What happened inside 2316 Chipman Street over the next several hours would become evidence in one of Tennessee's most horrific murder trials. Christopher Newsom was immediately separated from Channon. His hands were bound, a sack forced into his mouth, his head covered. The Knox County medical examiner later testified that Chris was sexually assaulted inside Davison's house. Sometime in the early morning hours of January 7, Eric Boyd forced Chris to march barefoot from the house. Temperatures were below freezing. Chris, wearing only a shirt and underwear, was forced to walk nearly half a mile to the railroad tracks. His bare feet left bloody prints in the frost. At the railroad tracks, Christopher Newsom was shot 3 times. The third and final shot, pressed against his head, severed his brainstem instantly. Christopher Newsom was dead at 23 years old. But even that wasn't enough. They wrapped his body in a camphor, doused it with gasoline, and set him on fire. While Chris was being murdered, Channon Christian was beginning a nightmare that would last 2 more days. Held captive primarily in the north bedroom, she was repeatedly raped by multiple attackers. Davison's and Cobbins, DNA would later confirm the sexual assault. The sexual violence was only part of her suffering. Channon was beaten repeatedly, kicked, her head sustaining severe trauma. At some point, Channon looked at her attackers and said the words that would haunt everyone. I don't want to die. In the final hours of her life, her attackers made a calculated decision to destroy DNA evidence. They poured bleach down her throat. They scrubbed her battered body with cleaning chemicals. The bleach burned her mouth and throat. Then came the final horror. Still alive, still breathing, Channon was soaked, her face covered with a small plastic bag. Her body was stuffed into multiple large trash bags and placed inside a residential garbage can in Davidson's kitchen. The medical examiner's testimony was clear. Channon Christian slowly suffocated to death in that garbage can. She was conscious. She knew what was happening to her. Channon died at least 12 hours after Christopher had been murdered. Sunday morning, January 7, 2007. The families of Channon and Chris are staring at their phones, waiting for a call that will never come. By Sunday afternoon, they contact Knoxville police, desperate. Officers suggest the young couple decided to spend the weekend together. What 24 hours, the families are told. While Channon Christian was dying, frustrated and terrified, the families took matters into their own hands. They organized their own search parties, made their own flyers. They contacted Channon's cell phone provider, demanding to know the last location her phone had been. Late Sunday night into early Monday morning, January 8, they found it. Channon's 4Runner, parked at the intersection of Chipman Street and Glade Avenue, less than 2 blocks from Davidson's house. The vehicle told a story of violence, and on the dashboard was a pack of Newport cigarettes. Neither Channon nor Chris smoked them. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. An envelope found inside the 4Runner. Fingerprints on the envelope matched Lemaricus Davidson, a known felon with an address at 2316 Chipman Street. On January 9, police obtained a search warrant. When officers arrived, the house was empty, but the evidence left behind told a horrifying story. In the kitchen, investigators made the discovery that will haunt them forever. Channon Christian's body stuffed inside a residential garbage can. The DNA evidence was overwhelming. Davidson's sperm was found in her body. Cobbins' DNA was also recovered. Items belonging to both Channon and Chris were scattered throughout the house. The killers had kept trophies. Shell casings in the house matched the bullets that killed Christopher Newsom. A massive manhunt began. The break came on January 11 when police traced phone calls between Davidson and Eric Boyd. Boyd, under pressure, led investigators to Davidson's hiding place. When police stormed the location, they found Davidson with Chris Newsom's house and the .22 caliber revolver, the murder weapon. Over the next several days, the remaining suspects, Thomas, Cobbins, and Coleman, were arrested. 5 arrests, 5 killers who thought they had committed the perfect crime. The trials began in 2008. For the Christian and Newsom families, this meant reliving their worst nightmare in excruciating detail. Eric Boyd was the first to face trial for being an accessory after the fact, sentenced to 18 years. The families knew this wasn't enough.
In August 2009, Letalvis Cobbins was sentenced to life in prison without parole. 2 months later, the jury sentenced ringleader Lemaricus Davidson to death. George Thomas received life without parole. Vanessa Coleman was sentenced to 53 years. By 2010, it seemed over. Then, everything collapsed. Judge Richard Baumgardner, who had presided over all 4 state trials, was forced to resign after admitting to years of drug addiction. He had been impaired while overseeing the most important murder trials in Knox County history. In December 2011, all 4 defendants were granted new trials. The families who had endured years of testimony would have to go through it all again. The retrials began in 2012. Coleman was reconvicted with a reduced sentence. Thomas was again found guilty. The Tennessee Supreme Court upheld Davidson's and Cobbins' original convictions. But Eric Boyd still hadn't faced state murder charges. Mary Newsom refused to give up, with a gut feeling that Boyd was the one who killed her son. The families worked tirelessly with prosecutors. The breakthrough came in 2018, 11 years after murders. A Knox County grand jury finally indicted Eric Boyd on 36 counts, including first-degree murder. Boyd's trial began in August 2019. George Thomas testified against him, identifying Boyd as Christopher Newsom's killer. On August 13th, 2019, 12 years, 7 months, and 7 days after the murders, Eric Boyd was found guilty on nearly all charges and sentenced to life without parole plus 90 years. Finally, all 5 killers were behind bars for life. Justice had been served, but at an enormous cost. From unimaginable tragedy came meaningful change. The case exposed critical flaws in Tennessee's legal system. In June 2014, Governor Bill Haslam signed 2 landmark laws named after the victims. The Chris Newsom Act eliminated the 13th juror rule, which had allowed the judge of corruption to invalidate the original convictions. Under Chris's law, once a jury delivers a unanimous verdict, it stands. The Channon Christian Act protects victims from character assassination in court. These laws ensure that what happened to these families can never happen again. The house at 2316 Chipman Street was demolished in 2008. In its place stands a memorial where Channon and Chris are remembered with dignity. The Shannon Gale Christian Foundation provides scholarships for University of Tennessee students. The Chris Newsom Memorial Foundation holds a yearly baseball tournament, providing 42 scholarships to Hall's high school students. 18 years later, 2 young people who had their futures stolen have become guardians of justice for others. Their names now protect victims across Tennessee. Their memories fund dreams for students who might otherwise never get the chance. Channon wanted to help underserved communities. Her foundation continues that mission. Chris took pride in building things that would last. His memorial foundation builds futures that endure for generations. Evil tried to erase them. Instead, their legacy grows stronger every year. January 6, 2007. That date will forever mark one of the darkest chapters in Knoxville's history. 18 years later, Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom's names are spoken not just as victims, but as forces for change. Their killers will never walk free again. The families will never stop grieving. The pain remains, but they've transformed their sorrow into a lasting legacy of justice. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. I can look up more details on either of the landmark acts named after Channon and Chris, if you'd like.